One second, let me just do the intros first.
Okay.
I'll start with the presentation, sorry. Alright, first I want to welcome everyone to the, what is it, December already, wow. Our last DCRUG of 2011. My name is Joe Grossberg. I am a organizer of this group and also a Ruby on Rails developer. I work at a company called Vox Media. We right now have two websites, SB Nation, which is a sports blogging community, and The Verge, which is a consumer technology site. We're looking for more Rails and mobile developers, so if that sounds interesting to you, please speak with me afterwards. You can see me on Twitter, just at Grossberg, add me on Facebook. I also want to explain for those that are new here. Well, first let me ask, who is at their first meeting of the DC Ruby Institute? Okay, good, a fair sampling. Our organization basically is formed to provide an opportunity for people who are in the Washington, D.C. area and are interested in Ruby, interested in Ruby on Rails, Sinatra, related technologies like that. And we have some musical accompaniment for the meeting tonight. People who are into pianos. An opportunity once a month to get together, learn a little bit, meet some new people, do some networking. Typically we'll have 2 full-length presentations. This month, as with last month, we're doing lightning talks, which are a bunch of shorter 10-minute presentations to mix it up a bit. But we are always looking for presenters, so please touch base with me if you're interested in doing that. You can have presented before, you can be a first-time presenter, as long as it's more or less on topic. It's fair game. By all means, shoot me an email through Meetup if you have an idea and let me know. It's not just a good opportunity to share with others and to get your name out there, and to also practice presenting if you want to do it in larger forums, such as like a RailsConf or RubyConf, something like that. It's a great opportunity to learn about a subject. Working on a presentation on something really makes you know your stuff, so that when you come here and people have questions, you can answer them intelligently, so that your presentation is well organized. It's a good way to dive into a topic that maybe you want to know more about, is to put together a presentation on it. So if that sounds interesting, please let me know. Our group aims for the middle, you could say. People who are totally new to Ruby on Rails and Ruby and just want to know what the big deal is are welcome here, as are people who use it every single day and are core contributors to major projects. We also, after the presentations, go around the corner to a bar called Rocket Bar. It's just around on, I should know this by now, what street is that? 7th. It's on 7th, underground, for people who want to come and have beers or soda or what have you and socialize with the group afterwards. A bunch of us head over there after. Let me see what else is there. I want to thank, of course, our sponsors. I want to thank Intridia, who is our founding sponsor. They provide the projector, the delicious Papa John's pizza and soda. They're a web and mobile consultancy based in Washington. That's INTRIDEA. And obviously, I'd like to thank Logic, our hosts, who graciously offer us this space every month for free. Do all the setup and tear down for the event. They're an enormous help, and we owe them a great deal of debt for helping us keep this organization going. So I'd like to thank them too. They are an e-discovery firm, which basically means data mining for legal purposes. Like say, some company's involved in a lawsuit and they have 1 million Word files and 10,000 access databases and PowerPoint and this and that, to go through there and find the proverbial needles in the haystack. Using Ruby is one of the tools they use. I think they're also looking for developers, and they're obviously based right here. Logic guys, raise your hands real quick. Okay, so if that sounds interesting, please seek out one of these folks afterwards and chat with them. I also want to make a few, before I do announcements, who else is looking to hire here? Quick show of hands. All right, cool. So we'll just go around the corner real quick. If you could just introduce yourself briefly and what sort of position you're looking to fill.
Okay.
We'll start here.
Thanks. Hey, my name is Carl Leonard. I'm from the area, so I've been here a long time. I've done contract work for the NIH, the FDA, Homeland Security, and I've started a new company with a couple of partners. And so, yes, we're doing Ruby Sinatra development. We're doing pattern detection and a little machine intelligence. But for starters, we're just looking for some folks to help us clean up our legacy Ruby stuff and get started a little more standardized with Heroku and that kind of thing. So if you're interested in that, even if you're just getting started, we're starting too. So drop me a line. Please let me know, part-time and full-time.
Great.
I got cards.
I think you're in the too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm Conrad Barsky. I'm a medical doctor and a co-founder of a small medical startup based on Ruby on Rails. We're looking for a part-time Ruby developer or Rails developer that wants to work from home. Yeah, so let me know if that is something that interests you guys in the medical field.
Okay, cool. What else? No? Okay. Announcements. First announcement, Jim, do you want to?
Oh yeah.
Arlington?
Yeah, there's Arlington Ruby meets up every other Wednesday. I think our next meeting is next week. We meet near the Clarendon Metro, so it's Metro accessible. I think we're doing something on pairing, right? Remote pairing next week. So check out arlingtonruby.org. Also another great place to give presentations, a little bit smaller than this. So if you want to prepare for DCRUG before you prepare for RailsConf or something, come out to Arlington Ruby.
Excellent. Any other announcements? Any events or things going on? Okay.
Well, one other thing I forgot
Yes.
to mention, my company name is hypnosis.com. So.
Okay, great. And also people are, as long as it's on topic, as long as it's Ruby or Rails development in the Washington area, are welcome to post just once, please, to our message board. You don't have to post it every time, every month, or every time a job opens or something like that, but if it's on topic, it's fair game. Other announcements, someone emailed me and was polite yet persistent, which is kind of remarkable for a marketing person. So I promised that I would mention this. There's a company called Wednesdays.com that organizes lunches for people interested in a topic such as Ruby. Quick show of hands, would anyone be interested in that? I can have them post to the board if that sounds up your alley.
Around town?
Go introverts. It's around town. I think the way it works is like they arrange for all the logistics of like, oh, okay, there'll be 10 of you guys or 5 of you guys like meeting at like Nando's Peri Peri in Chinatown on this date at like 12:30, and so okay, so a few people are interested. All right, then I'll ask them to.
Is it a commercial service or?
It is a commercial service. I think they get a cut of something from the maybe from the venue. I'm not totally clear on their business model,
Yeah.
but what else
I
is
know
there
about
in that? Yeah. What?
Yeah, I know about it from another group that I
Okay.
participated with, and you pay up front and they do get a small service fee for setting everything up and taking care of it. But it's a new thing. I was on their site today. Which is pretty cool.
So I think the gist of it is in the same way that, I guess analogous to how Meetup provides an opportunity for people interested in a topic to get together and have a big meetup, they would find people in a community or subject area that want to get together for a lunch or something like that. So.
That's fine, but we can also just, if we want to, just post a message saying, hey guys, let's get together Wednesday at noon at this restaurant. And, I mean,
I think it's just they basically take care of all the organizing and facilitating and putting together the taking care of all the the hassle out of it extensively. I mean, people can give it a trial run and see if it's any good. I can't vouch for it one way or the other, but I did want to gauge people's interest level, and so I think it's pretty much like they'll take care of the coordination of stuff, and you just gotta pay and show up and have your meal and speak with folks. So I'll pass along that information for people who are interested. You guys can, sign up on the site, and for those who aren't, feel free to, archive it or delete it, whatever mail service you're using. Does anyone have any other announcements before we get to the speakers?
Oh yeah, actually, I I totally forgot about this. We're planning a conference, a Ruby conference on February 4th. We just got the space in George Mason out by the Clarendon Metro. And it's going to be focused on Rubinius. So we haven't yet put things together to call for papers, but we're planning on doing part unconference and part prepared presentations. So I'll email the list when we have one.
Absolutely, yeah, that's, all right, excellent. Any other ones before we go?
Sorry.
Okay, well, we've got 5 speakers scheduled today. I'm gonna give you guys 10 minutes and then, oh, sorry. Sure.
That's all right.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm from Oak Power, and we're definitely looking to hire some Java and Rails developers. So I'm encouraged to following that.
Okay, excellent. And what was your name?
I'm Kristen.
Kristen, okay. Thank you, Kristen. All right, so it's 10 minutes per speaker. I'll give a little, when it's about that time. And then as we do Q&As for the speakers, we'll have the next person set up their laptop. JP is going to be recording the stuff for people that couldn't make it here with people's permission. If you're a speaker and you don't want to be recorded, you don't need to explain why. It could be anything from, intellectual property to stage fright. You just tell him, cut the camera for your speech and he'll do that. I'd also, what's that? Good to know you. If anyone's doing any, top secret passwords in their slides. Also, if any speakers, if applicable, it'd be great if you could also upload any slides or links to GitHub projects that are relevant to the site. Again, for people who couldn't make it out tonight, that would be awesome too. So then I guess without further ado, we'll get started. First we have a talk on internationalization in Ruby, which is what the IATN stands for. So take it away.
So, as you can see my name, I'm a Polish guy. I'm coming from Turkey. I lived in Germany for 10 years. I can speak 4 languages. That's why this topic was interesting for me, because I'm working also for this area. So I do work daily job, lifecycle developer, Adobe Lifecycle, have you heard? Anyway, which is the Adobe product for governments. But I do Ruby for my startup project. I know Perl and old stuff, then PHP, Code Fusion, Java, everything, anyway. It's good to know. So you can reach me over Twitter with my last name. So why we have this topic? Because English is just another language. We have other languages in the web. It's growing and growing. So we had to have some other ways to present our content or our business. So this is a good slogan that I like. So what is the problem? So we have projects, but we have also problems with our projects when especially we want to present our business for other countries, other locations. So the major problem is the languages. So we have other languages in the world that we know, 128 accepted languages currently. We have currencies, we have dates, time zones, calendars, and even cultural problems. For example, when you do this in Iran, this is like this. Knowing all these are important. So, of course, the other problem is when you create a multilingual site, you have to manage your project very easily. There are some companies that are creating multilingual content and they are basically copying their English content and copying another directory and maintaining that directory. Of course, it's not a way of organizing this stuff. So, what are all these crap? So we have IATN and localization. Basically, IATN is the process that while creating your project, you have to create your project minimum in 2 languages. So this process called as IATN. After that, you can localize any project which has the IATN capabilities. When you create your project in IATN standards, then you can localize this project for any other languages. There's no limitation. But first, you have to have minimum 2 languages. And we call globalization for both IATN and LTN process. This is well known in the community or the industry as globalization. When they refer by a job or any process or anything, they will call as globalization, not IATN. So M17 is the web-based solutions has this word, especially in the Ruby world, which means you may have multiple languages in same content. One page with multiple languages. This is not common, but you may have this. So they call multi-lingualization for that. And culturalization is my word. I created that. So this is important because especially when you create a content. I used to manage a dating project. I was CTO for that project. We had 21 languages and 21, more than 50 different countries. So there are lots of cultural issues, lots of cultural problems with all those countries and cultures. So you have to be aware about all those problems when you create a project. So I'm trying to go quick. So what are the char sets? We have char sets. In the first days of the computer world, we had only Latin. Then we call it ASCII words. This is 256 characters, but we have other languages which has lots of other fancy stuff. So what we were doing is we were creating the ISO standards. For example, one is for Western European, but 15 for Eastern European, or 24 for Turkey, 28 for Germany. We have lots of different, standards, or Shift IS for Japanese. So what we do now is we are using all languages in Unicode, UTF-8. Unicode, in the next page I showed. Let's go to Unicode. Basically, Unicode is a standard which contains all the languages and symbols in the world. They are combining all these as a package. And you can reuse for any project that you have. Most of them, Ruby or Java or other languages, all contain some Unicode libraries already, or your operating system, or any platform that you have, except GNU. So we call as locale. When we refer in a language, normally language is just English, but your English is different in UK or Australia. So that's why we call as a locale. Majorly, while referring in language-related stuff, we are using locale, but in Ruby world we prefer only language part, like English. And locale means, of course, the first part is the language, English, and the second part the US. For example, there's a different one in Germany and Switzerland, German in Switzerland, which is different than German in Germany. We have to be careful about that. But mostly for the countries like Turkey, for example, we have TRTR or DED or whatever country, similar. But in practical world, we are just using the language part, especially in the Ruby i89 plugin. Again, has only the language part, but if you want to extend this, you can extend with usage. So this one. So Ruby and i89, since 2.2, we have these capabilities in Ruby. And every language, improvements, we have different.
Ruby 2.2?
Yeah.
Rails.
What is that?
I think you mean
Sorry,
Rails.
Rails.
Okay.
My bad. Sorry. I'm a new Ruby guy, so don't get hot. So I'm using Ruby since 3 months, 4 months. Yeah.
So that's Rails?
Rails. It should be Rails. Ruby on Rails. And of course, the current one, you have to enable this on the gem files, which is coming with the standard gem files. On the gem file, you can enable this easily, very easy. And there are also other external libraries. If you want to extend with other capabilities, you can extend. I like the globalize too. There's another one, which supports also locale with the location. And you can import all those into your project and use directly. The i89 library will use English as a default, which is the US English. Whenever you create a project with the multi-lingual, it automatically creates the English file in your locale folder. So that's the default. Of course, you can extend this with other languages. And of course, when you have this capability in your application, you can add as much as languages that you want. There's no limitation. So we have all the language libraries. We save them in the config and locales directory. We have RB and YAM files. The YAM files contain all our content. I will show them as an example. The en hello word. The en means the language. The hello is our keyboard, or we call a string. And the hello word is just the definition, the syntax. And basically, whatever you have as a keyword, whatever keyword that you have to save in this language in this file. So when you need to use these files, it knows what to grab. So every language has its own library, like en, e, tr, whatever. I have a private one. You can create any language like that. I mean, there's no limitation. So if you remember, Facebook had a private language. Same logic, you can create your own project in private language.
So Klingon too.
Klingon too, except Unicode problems. So we have some methods embedded already in our language. So when you translate, basically it's very simple to use. Whenever you have anything as a hard-coded content, you just need to use this one instead of the hard-coded one. I will have a sample for that. And it localizes for localizing any time or date-related stuff. And we can also customize all those in our language-related file. I will show a demo for that. And basically you can play with all these directly in your configuration file for the language. So we have some attribute readers. For example, if you don't want to use the default one, you want to force the language, you can force the language with the locale parameter. Or if you want to load from a different location, you can use load path. You can set the default locale, or you can define exception handler for different proposals. The backend is, we are using the YAM file as a default, but you may have some projects from PHP, for example, which uses gettext, or Java, which uses resource files. You can reuse those files with the different backend techniques. And for our projects, for example, we are using Redis as a storage, and all our language-related files are saved on Redis. So we are providing a different backend for that, which we created custom. So this is good to go. So we have literals, standard. When you have a keyword, you can say hello flash or hello world, whatever. The syntax is very straightforward. This is variable syntax is important if you have, for example, depending on the language, you may have a variable, but the location of the variable may change, may vary depending on the language. We have the page 1 of 2 in English, but it's different in German. So you have 1 of 2 or 1/2 in German, for example, than page. So these are all important that you can directly change in your keyword. Whatever you want to put your parameter, you put parameter, and define your keyword based on your location, parameter location. You can generate all these with your own language logic. It's good to refer with the parameters directly. Here I set the user and a message and combine them in our related file. So currencies, we have, this is, to be honest, complicated because in some number formatting functions, there's no well-known standards, I mean, like in Java or other words. So you have to create some own your logic. Here, what I use with the $, or whatever, I just define all those in my language file and reuse here, but there's no standard way of doing this. I don't know how to do. But this is what I do now currently, number to currency format. Then use the value, then use the units, separator, delimiter, then I format. Because especially in Europe, they have comma and dots, different locations, so you have to be aware about that.
The money gem lets you do this kind of stuff a lot easier.
Good to know. I will learn it. So datetime formatting, again, you can format your datetimes directly in your language file, which is straightforward. And while using, you just refer which format. You may have multiple, short, long, or whatever. You can define directly here. And setting the locale, so we have a default one on application RB file. You can define your locale directly over there, which overrides for all your application. By the way, all our Ruby files are encoded in with the latest versions encoded in Unicode, so you don't need to worry about that. Because if you have any hard-coded content in directly your Ruby files, you may have different characters showing on the page. Just be careful that you save all your files in Unicode, UTF-8 Unicode, then you don't have any problem. And when we want to load with the initializers, we can define also location of the Ruby YAM file for the language, or you can directly set with the default locale with the plugin again. And passing the locale, we have a basic technique for that. Whatever you pass, we just before filter we use this technique and load from that. The refer is just users locale tr. Whatever I put over there instead of tr. This is the basic way, but what we have is we have a list for our available applications for our languages. Sorry, available languages for our application. So when this file, I mean locale, is on this list, so we just change the language. This is something that we can extend. Only allow the available languages, because we have dating size, some size only has some languages, some other size, some other languages, so you can customize all those. I'm trying to go quick. So you can set the locale based on the domains. If you have a project with multiple domains based on the location, like the German, so you can set basically parse the domain TLB and use the TLB as a reference. But this is not very common, but you can do that. Or you can use the subdomain de.mydomain.com and parse again and reuse it. That's also possible. So we create, for example, an application with 21 languages, but same code. We were grabbing from the subdomains, and based on subdomains, we were just referring to the languages, whatever subdomain that we had. This was the easiest way for us. And I will have the slides anytime that you want, so that's why don't worry about the syntax, you can reach later. So switching locale, we may have, for example, link, and load the configuration from URL from my app config parameter, and request, and it goes for my related domain, for example. You can do something like that very easily for other languages also. And by the way, whenever you use the multilingual switch, always use the native language. Like if you refer a German, don't say German, say Dutch or something like that. This is always the best practice. And you can also use the browsers to detect the locale. For example, the most German guys in Germany using their browsers in German. You can grab this easily from the CGI variables and use the detection. But for example, we were doing also geo-IP detection for some countries like Greek. And if their IP is on Greece, so we were setting the default language as a Greek. But this was not a good way, because in Greece they were preferring using English browsers or English sites. So this was a mistake, so we then switched based on the browsers. If their browsers is Greek, they were getting the Greek pages. If their browser is English, they were getting English one. So all these are strategic decisions. Or you can have a setting for the user. Whenever you have a user profile, user can select, hey, I want this profile language, and I load it. You can customize that way. Yeah, I'm just finishing it. Two more things. So if you are dealing with databases, just be aware about having Unicode on database. So on MySQL 4.1 plus, we have the Unicode support. On MySQL server, you just need to be careful about the field types. SQLite, there are some case sensitivity problems. Be aware about that. You need to upper or lower while comparing. Same problem for MySQL. While comparing, your collation is important. If you have, for example, some fancy character like my I without that, my last name, the conversion is always headache, so just be aware about those. Okay. There are some references. That's it. Yeah, canvas.
So, Sean, if you want to get set up for using Ruby with R, while people ask questions that they might have. Anyone have a question about internationalization? Anyone else? Or comments? Yes.
Yeah, question.
Sure.
Are you familiar with Java's internationalization, and if so, how would you compare the two?
The question was how would you compare Java's internationalization with Ruby's?
It's almost same, except the Java language files, the properties files are not saved in Unicode. You have to use a specific tool to manage them. So they are saving just escape Unicode characters in properties files. It's not easy to manage them. You have to have a resource bundle manager for it.
But how about things like
Except that the whole logic is same.
how about things like inheritance, where like you could have one English file and then English Australia, or just the deviant?
Same logic. There's no difference. And of course, Java has more standard ways of doing some stuff than Ruby, like the formatting the numbers, currencies, all these kind of stuff. They have already embedded in directive language, which is somehow nice.
Is Java in better shape than Ruby?
I think so. In some cases, yes. But it's not practical.
Languages are very different things.
It seems
There
to
are
me.
pros and cons.
It seems to me like it's still kind of a hack, like linked to you had to write your own configuration for a domain. And I feel like Rails ought to have something in that. It seems like
Yeah.
that's really,
As I said, pros and cons.
yeah,
The convention is everything.
yeah.
We like conventions, so that's why we use Ruby. But Java has also some powerful parts. I mean, I use the Ruby also on Java, top of Java, JRuby. Anyway, okay.
Oh, all right.
Anytime you can ask any question, don't hesitate.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Support for slides.
Come on, everyone.
I think you want to turn the projector a little bit. Perfect.
Okay. So, I don't give a lot of presentations, so there's bound, which I'm sorry. They also say if you can't be brief, be funny. I'm sorry.
Could you speak loudly, please?
Yes, sorry, again. Jim actually gave me some advice. He said, told me to picture myself naked. How you doing? But yeah, so let's try and set the mood here. Hope this works. Oh. Set the mood.
Probably close those.
Yeah.
That's like Thursday. Read your license.
You work now. Decline that. Well, maybe I can just play it random. Hopefully the rest will work now. Is everyone getting excited? Okay. Now I'll set the mood for myself. That's me, Matt. Rubikon. I would have preferred to get a picture of me and him wrestling on the lawn, but no one took one. He's remarkably wiry. Anyways, my talk's about using R with Ruby, and how this came about is I work in a behavioral economics research lab. Actually, I have 2 jobs now, but we have to analyze these big sets of data that get in like 30 or 40 or 60 CSV files, a couple columns, and have to do analysis on them. We're all Ruby people. We like to script things, make it easier rather than plugging into Excel. I asked my boss when we were for lunch, you know, my boss out for lunch, if he could buy me Stata. It's a statistical software. And he said, sure, I'll put in a request. And 2 months later, still hadn't got the software. So I started learning R. And let's go on. And so I had a hard time with this talk because it's I only have 10 minutes, and Joe will keep me honest. And you know, there's statistics, there's R, there's Ruby, and maybe I don't have enough time to talk about everything. But so the important thing is you know, we all need to learn statistics because it's important. And you know, just to give you some examples, over the past week, I'm watching some TV and whatnot, and you wouldn't believe how often statistical things come up. You know, on House, I was watching it. Stephen Wright, and all these different things. And you know, if you don't have a grasp of statistics, you know, you're not going to understand what any of this stuff means.
Of course, the statistics are wrong almost 100% of the time when you watch TV.
You wouldn't know that.
99% were made up on the spot. But not irregardless. So then, where are we? Okay, so anyway, so I started my quest to learn R and Ruby, and I went out there, looked at all the different gems, all the different packages, and I found that there's 3. The first one was this one called Artist Ruby. Went on the GitHub. There was a bunch of issues. Hadn't been updated since 2008, 2009. So I just skipped that one. Went on to one called RServe. Didn't look too bad. And then I found this one called Grin Ruby. So let's see. So here's this first one, RServe. This is kind of the language to it, and it's just kind of ugly, like instantiating things inside of methods and classes and modules, and it's just not that fun. And basically, it just turns out all it is it's an R server itself. So you're not actually using R, you're using someone else's R server. So then I found this one, Grin Ruby, and if there are any R users here, you'll see here that this is actually just R code. You get to use R right inside of Ruby, and it's fantastic. Okay, so Ruby statistics, isn't this fantastic?
Hell yeah!
Yeah. Expecting a little bit more. Come on, like linear regression, tobits, probits, difference, regression discontinuities. Come on. Two stage squares. Come on, instrument of variables. Okay, so anyways, like I said, I didn't have a lot of time, so I put together this basic example, and it's really basic. It's just one little method, but it'll show you how it works. And so here's my basic example. Reading in a CSV file, slicing off the top, because the top is just the headers, this column, that column, and then got a couple of these little methods that I will show you what they are here. First one, basically just throw the two rows into an array. Your X and your Y variable, dependent or independent, or whatever you want to think of them. So now let's look. So we want to get our summary statistics of our variable. And again, this is just simple Ruby here. Some stats, summary of the variable. Pull. You always want to use pull for your when you're pulling stuff out. Just because you're supposed to. And then keys printed out a couple decimal places. And then get your LM as your linear regression model, and then round it off, get your estimate. And what does it look like? Basic summary statistics. And this is pretty much like what I used it for. Just ran a little loop, ran through the 60 CSV files, and then put it into pasted it into a Google spreadsheet and regression, a couple other things. But really basic and really simple.
It looks hard.
You can always use Excel.
Excel? Yeah, you can use Excel.
I'm saying like the math part. Like I didn't understand that.
Well, okay. That'll be another talk.
Yay.
Statistics. But you can generate plots and histograms and cumulative distribution functions. Really easy. And and they output them, and you can output them with color and whatnot. I just actually made these up like in the span of 5 minutes. So, oh, also don't forget to install R. You need R on your computer, otherwise none of this will work. That's reason for that. Okay, I didn't know how long I was going to talk, so I think I have some XKCD cartoons now. Okay, where's Human back? And so, read them in your own time. Okay, let's see. Yeah, more cartoons. So I talk fast when I'm nervous. And so, anyways, I supposed to be a link to our Arlington Ruby page. I guess the Wi-Fi wasn't on. Anyways, yeah, Dean stole my thunder for the Arlington Ruby conference. We're having a Ruby retrosession conference in Arlington on February 4th, so please come. Yeah.
What is that supposed to be? Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I'll leave you to go to the website and find out.
How does one install R? Is it like a native thing?
Yeah, you can install R through Homebrew or ports, or just go to the website, get the binary.
And since it's a native thing, can you use R in Ruby with JRuby?
Don't use JRuby. So.
Did R create those graphics?
Yes, I create those. Yes.
Is it the gem that does it, or R itself?
R creates them. And so, yeah. And that's it. Here's.
I got a quick question. I saw a meetup is an R programming meetup at DCRUG. Is that any good? Should people go?
Yeah, I tried to go to one and it was full. So.
I just see a list of all the new programming ones, and I saw that that was one.
It's fairly popular.
Yeah.
You mentioned having to install R on your computer. Do you have any experience trying to get R to work in the cloud? Like if you actually wanted to use it with Rails?
No experience with Rails. Sorry.
Probably easier than Linux.
When you're saying R, not a val,
yeah.
Like, what's happening? Is it in a library, like a C extension? It's got its own interpreter. Is it?
Yeah. Well,
where is R running, and how is it running?
Well, R is running, and basically you're telling R to run these commands.
It's another process,
right?
That you're communicating with.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And
yeah, I wanted to help you out on that because I've done a little of that also. R runs in the background and it exports images, so you can shell it commands and it'll export a snapshot of whatever the graphical images you want, and then you can import it to your cloud app or whatever we'll point to.
Gotcha, but as you were calling R a val, you were actually giving it input and getting output, and then reusing that, right? But you could also, you're saying, have it go ahead and output image files or whatever.
Yeah, because that was the tricky part for me. Getting the commands and the data back was cool, but the graphics was what was most powerful for R, and finding a way to get that out of it was a little tricky, but it's possible.
I've heard R is a lot faster than other statistical software like SAS and Stata, and I haven't verified that for myself. I do have this giant project I did in grad school where we did an extract of the census data, with 11 million observations and hundreds of rows. And my Stata code took an hour and a half to run. I'm currently reprogramming that in R to see how long it'll take, so I can side by side. I'll let you guys know.
I apologize, I didn't hear too well what you guys were saying up there. But is R running as a server and the gem is communicating with it as a web service, or is it a library, or is it a?
It's more like a library. Yeah, I don't think it's a web server.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
I guess a couple months ago, I started trying to learn Lisp, and I found myself to understand the Lisp, I would rewrite the examples in Ruby, and I was pretty surprised that you could really program Lisp, Lisp style in Ruby. And this talk is sort of about what I learned. Probably another 10 title for the talk would be more how Ruby was influenced by Lisp, since Lisp was way ahead of it. So here's a brief history of Lisp. It was developed about 50 years ago. It's the second oldest language. It's still in use. Only Fortran is older. It came mainly out of AI research. And some of the features that were introduced by Lisp were S expressions, which are the notation that's currently used to write Lisp programs. It was the first recursive language. It introduced dynamic typing and garbage collection. And Scheme, which is what I'm going to use in the examples, was developed about 35 years ago. And the programming concepts that were first implemented in Scheme that we wound up using in Ruby are the lambda calculus, which is functional programming, and lexical. It was the first Lisp program to use lexical scoping, though it wasn't the first program to use the first programming language to use lexical scoping. And it also was the first to implement continuations and tail recursion. Tail recursion's optimization of. So, if we want to program in a Lisp style in Ruby, we can't use methods. We have to write everything with lambdas and do variable assignments. So here's the first example. On this side we have Lisp, and here's Ruby. So one of the things that's different about Lisp is we have to, much like in Java and C, C++, we have to define all of our variables. So what we're doing here is we're defining a function called serial number generator, and we're assigning it to a lambda. And this is like an outer scope for the function. And within this we define, well, first say what a serial number generator does. It just, it's a function, and as you call it, it just generates a sequence of numbers 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here we're assigning a function, assigning a lambda to a variable called serial number generator. And in this outer, this lambda is defined in an outer scope. And in this outer scope, we're defining our serial number generator S and setting it to 0. And now, I guess the leap is that our function is going to return another lambda that actually updates this value. Okay. Here's the same code in Ruby. So in Ruby, we don't have to use define. Well, also, I guess also when we update a variable, we have to use like this set to update. Where in Ruby, we sort of get defined for free. So we assign the outer lambda here to our variable called serial number generator. We initialize the serial number to 0, and then this lambda is going to return another lambda that updates the serial number generator and returns it. Right here, we're returning it. And in each of the languages, here's how you create your serial number generator. So here you're defining index to this lambda that's returned by the serial number generator. And we're doing the same thing in Ruby. And then we call our function index 2 times, and it returns a number 1 or 2. So the number S is being updated within the outer scope of the here. And the same thing in Ruby, like we can call a lambda using a bracket notation. Okay, this example is going to look pretty gnarly when you first look at it, but it's not really so bad. So we're going to define a class. And everything that's orange is, I should have said in the last slide, is part of a Scheme programming language. Everything that's blue I've defined, and the green is a class as an instance variable. So here we're defining our class, and we define, as we did before, an outer scope to declare all of our methods and instance variables. And balance is our instance variable, so this is just going to update an account balance. So here we define our instance variable and set it to 0. This is the definition of the getter, returning the balance. Now we're going to define a method to do a deposit, and here we're just making a lambda, assigning it to deposit, and it's just updating the balance by amount. And when we withdraw some money, we just essentially assign another lambda, and it's just going to do a negative deposit of amount. And now this this function is going to return another lambda that's actually a case statement that's doing, like apply is sort of the Lisp equivalent of send. So it's essentially going to take a symbol, which this little apostrophe means symbol in Lisp. It's going to take a symbol as an arg and some arguments that are passed to the function. It's essentially going to do a send to a variable within the scope. Okay. here's the same thing in Ruby. So we define an outer lambda, we define our instance variable, and here we define all of our class methods and just their variables within this outer scope. And now this lambda returns another lambda. It's actually a case method that just actually calls the methods within the scope. Like you can't use send, since send only works on methods. So we have to actually call them, so we can't really do it exactly the same. And so to create our account, we just say make account, and we call all the methods on account by just passing the symbol and the arguments to update the methods. So there's another way in Ruby that we could write a class, which is actually a little cooler. We sort of do the same thing, define our instance variable and our methods, and instead of returning it as a lambda, we return it as a hash. And what's sort of cool about this is you could implement inheritance by just doing a merge of hashes. And it also changes the syntax of how would we call the methods on our class a little bit, since now we essentially have to reference the symbol in the hash and then pass that, the arguments, to our method. And I guess what's also interesting about this is it looks a lot like JavaScript. So if you use the JSON notation to define your methods. Okay, this is my last example. It's a continuation. It's called an escape continuation. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a method that takes the product of a list of numbers. And if there's a 0 within our list, we just want to break out of the recursive call and return 0. So since we don't really have to multiply anything else any longer. So what we do is we define, as before, we define our outer scope, or this is actually a little different. This is just going to be a recursive function call. So we define our function list product as by assigning lambda to the list product variable. Call CC is the continuation. So our continuation is going to be assigned to this to exit. Okay. So here, if we pass, like P is the list we're going to take a product of, so if our list is null, it returns 1. And if car actually takes the head of the list, so if the head of our list is ever equals 0, we're going to call our continuation, and this will exit return 0. If everything's cool, we take the head off and multiply it with everything else and recall our function until our list is empty. So this will take 1, 2, 3, return 6. If we get 1, 0, 3, it's going to return 0 and bail on the second call. Same thing in Ruby. It's also very close because Ruby also uses call CC to do a continuation. And essentially the logic is the same. Only here, if we want to exit the continuation, we call exit and pass the number we want to exit the continuation with. And right quick. You can also do escape continuation with fibers. John Mallory helped me with this at work. So essentially, sort of one of the bummers about fibers, though, is they're not reentrant. So you can't create a fiber within a recursive call. So essentially, you have to define a lambda, and within this lambda, you need to define another lambda that's the function we're going to call that's recursive. And we make this lambda return our fiber creator, and then within the fiber, we yield our recursive call and starts going. And then when we if we hit 0, we just yield the fiber and it exits. So it has like the same behavior as doing a continuation. Like also, to me, I think fibers are probably closer to continuations, but everyone wants to call them threads. And I mean, you really would think of the continuation as a fancy go-to statement as opposed to being a thread. So
I think it's because of the name.
Fiber, I mean, it's the thing, and even if you read the main description of it on the Ruby documentation, it says like a thread instead of like a continuation. But a continuation is actually that example I gave, if you run it in Ruby 1.87, it crashes for the continuation. Like this won't run in 1.87, but it works fine in 1.9. So I'm going to wrap up with, so I guess sort of what I was trying to, I meant to say some things, I forgot. But I guess sort of the point was that there's sort of a big subset of functionality that was introduced in Lisp and sort of from the early 60s through the 80s that wound up being implemented in several, it took it almost 20, 30 years before a lot of these features were implemented in mainstream programming languages like Ruby, Python, and JavaScript. And I mean, I thought it was interesting. Garbage collection work started in the 60s, and there were almost 35 years before Java came along that actually implemented garbage collection in a mainstream language. So I guess sort of the point of this slide is to say, well, what influences are going to come from the future, or what programming languages now are just sort of in academic land or have small user bases that could introduce new features that wind up becoming commonplace in the future. So I sort of broke it down into a couple of big programming buckets: distributed programming, Erlang, Scala, Haskell, which most people have probably heard of. There's a couple of odd ones which I'll talk about more in a minute, called Oz, Pig, Alice, and Alice ML. So sort of distributed programming is sort of a nut that's trying to be cracked right now, and there's several new programming concepts and paradigms being introduced by these languages. There's a programming formalism, or a mathematical formalism based upon sort of Turing machines, where the Turing machines are separate Turing machines that actually communicate and pass messages. So there's actually a mathematical formalism built upon this called pi calculus. And like this Pict is a programming language that's sort of based upon some of the concepts that are developed in pi calculus. You also have these sort of odd programming languages called SPICO and Bio, SPI, which are actually used to program biological processes, which I can't really say I know what's special about it and why it's relevant to biology, but it seems to be that people in biology like pi calculus or something. And then in logic programming, we've had Perl and we've had Prolog around for a while, but it's never caught on. And Oz is essentially a logic programming language type that's actually been developed for distributed programming. And then there's a programming language, that was sort of a prototype programming language called ILML that was developed probably in the 80s. And sort of the popular things now are Haskell, OCaml, and Haskell and F# had a big influence with this. That's all.
Where's closure?
I just didn't want to put it up there. I just slipped my mind. I mean, I saw closure as really, it's just more of another Lisp dialect, like a scheme or common Lisp. It didn't really. I don't think there's really anything to do about it.
Yeah.
That's not.
You want to get? Well, we take one.
Yeah. You told us a lot about that. How I'm interested in learning more about the why. I understand that when you wrap everything in a lambda and you just return the lambda, all that state inside is totally hidden. There's no way to get into it and change it. I understand that benefit.
Right.
Are there others? I mean, you don't have the macros in Ruby.
You can fake out macros, sort of. With yeah, you can. With just doing class methods and just using. You have to sort of start using methods to do it, but you can dynamically write code and stick it as a method. You're not really using templates like you do in Lisp, but you can sort of make it out.
So what are the sweetest spots for using this Lisp style in Ruby?
I wouldn't say you would want to use it at all. I thought it was just sort of illustrative of some language features. I mean, I think functional programming is really so baked into Ruby that a lot of people don't realize they're doing functional programming whenever they're using blocks and doing yields. And it's got, I think Ruby has a far more polished interface for doing functional programming than you see in Lisp. And well, I guess what I thought was interesting was when I was sort of reading about the history of how lambdas got into all the different languages, Ruby was the only one where there was an intentional design to sort of meld object-oriented programming and functional programming, which they did well in Python. It was somewhat haphazard, that some guy knew about Lisp and he wrote Lambda and just stuck it in there. And
all right, I'm going to just ask you. No problem.
Yeah, plug the cord in tighter.
I think some of the pins might be all the way in, but you just do it Alright, there we go. Sweet.
Thank you. Alright, hello everybody. My name is Dan. I work at Razoo here in town, and we're building a social fundraising platform using Ruby on Rails. And I recently spent some time distributing our test suite on the cloud, and it turned out to be a pretty cool project, so I thought I'd share it with you guys. All right, so the short story is that we've got a pretty good sized suite, and the fastest I could get it to run on my machine was about 11 minutes. And that's using 4 cores. And you know, it's not too bad, but it bogged my machine down pretty good. And then waiting 11 minutes is a little too long if you're waiting to push a commit.
What's the test suite based on?
It's just straight Rails.
Of the test unit? Or?
Yeah, it should have. Okay. So nothing too crazy. Would that make a difference?
Just curious.
Rewrite it. So I used Amazon EC2 and a cluster of 5 servers, and I got that time down to about 3 minutes, which I thought was pretty good. And I didn't put a ton of time optimizing that, so I think there's actually some good room for improvement. Thank you. I did it using 2 gems. The first is Hydra, which is a gem that lets you run your tests in parallel on multiple local cores or remote hosts. And the other is Fog, which is a gem that gives you an active record-like interface to Amazon or Rackspace or other cloud services. And so, in the sentence, what I did was I created a cluster of 5 servers with Fog, and then I told Hydra to run the suite on those servers. So, if you want to do this, I recommend doing a little due diligence first. Make sure your tests run concurrently with Hydra. Some weird things can happen when you start running tests in parallel. Like if 2 tests are operating on the same file, they might interfere with each other. And for sure, these are not the most fun problems to track down. And Hydra actually makes it pretty easy to run your suite on your friend's machine with like 2 runners. It doesn't take much to do that. So I definitely recommend doing that and just sort of see what you're up against, because it could be a lot, or it might work the first time and you're good to go. The second thing I do is get your suite running on an EC2 instance. So I develop on a Mac, but I run Ubuntu on the EC2. And sure enough, there were some issues with the way that suite ran in those 2 environments. So I'd fire up an instance and sort of hammer your way through to a running suite. You know, it's kind of like setting up your dev environment. You're just doing it on an instance. Once you got those 2 things, though, I really do think you're in pretty good shape to get testing on the cloud. So a quick dip into Hydra's configuration. I think it's pretty simple. You add a little bit to your rake file, and then Hydra looks for a hydra.yaml file to tell it, you know, where to run the test and how to run it. So Hydra just expects that wherever it's running the test, you have everything there already. So the machine's configured, your code is there, sitting in a directory, the database is set up, everything's just waiting for Hydra to run it. And so really all you're doing is telling Hydra, shell to this machine, change to this directory, and fire up this number of runners. Pretty easy to set up. Next please. So this is basically the approach I took. I started off with a script that would actually configure each server in my cluster, and that ended up taking way too long because you're installing packages and copying code and all this stuff. So I changed to creating a master server, and then EC2 lets you save off an image of that server, which you can then use to create the rest of the servers in your cluster. And then part of the process is keeping track of a little state in a couple YAML files. And here's that Hydra YAML. So I ended up writing just a big set of rake tasks. And let me dive into this one, the first one, to show you a little bit of fog. So fog, I think, is dynamite. It's pretty easy to use. Basically, you give it your Amazon account credentials, which I do here, and one more. Once you're connected to your account, Fog gives you like this set of collections that represent cloud resources. So there's collections for storage and DNS and all this other stuff. I didn't use any of that. I just used the servers collection. And you can see here, I do servers.create, I pass it some attributes, and then Amazon goes off and creates a server for me. And when I get that server back, I can do a bunch of cool stuff. I can see if it's running, see if it's stopped. I can copy files to it. I can execute commands on it. I can shell into it. Basically, Fog gives you a really comprehensive API to manage all this stuff in pure Ruby. Very nice API. So, that's really 90% of this project was writing Ruby with Fog to create these servers, start them, copy code to them, get them running, that kind of stuff. So if you give me one more slide. So the steps I took, I sort of took a little detour into Chef to do most of the server configuration. You don't have to do that. You can just configure it by hand, save off that image, and use that to create your cluster. But Chef, definitely very cool. I just sort of scratched the surface there. But, it's nice to have everything automated, so my memory is for shit. So like if I don't have it written down, I can't remember how to do anything. So Chef gives me a nice recipe to remind me what I did. So the remaining steps are sync, get my code down to that master server, bundle, run bundler, get the gems installed, prepare the database, basically load the database. And at that point, you can shell into the machine, run your suite, make sure everything's tip-top. And if it is, I create that image. On EC2, it's called an AMI. And basically, I'm ready to start playing with more servers. More. So the cluster is pretty similar. Another task to create a cluster. It's just more Fog. Make me more servers, please. And then because you're working with your working directory, you've got code that you've changed. You still have to sync your code down to those servers before you do a run. If you've added a gem, you still got to run bundler on those servers. If you've changed the schema, you've got to migrate the database onto the server. So you can't quite get away from these tasks in the normal workflow. But if you've done most of your work on that master server, this should be quick. So at this point, you've got a running cluster. It's configured, it's loaded, it's ready to run Hydra. And so there's one last simple step, and that is to run Hydra. I mean, it just does its thing, and if everything works, you've saved yourself 8 minutes of your life. So it's not a perfect solution. One last slide. I didn't really design it for multiple developers, so I just assumed that each dev would have their own little cluster. And so if you've got, that can get a little expensive. I figured it to be about $140 a month to keep that cluster running most of the time. But I think there's a lot I could do to bring that down. But even so, I think like if you think about what you pay for dev time these days, if running the suite more often saves you 2 or 3 broken builds a month, 140 isn't that bad. So that is all I have for you. Thank you very much.
So your EC2 instances, they don't just run for the time period of the test. They actually, you just persist them.
Yeah, it takes like maybe 20 seconds to spin them up. So like, I just keep them running. But like, what happened a few times is I would forget to stop the cluster and let it run all weekend, just sitting there. So like, I keep meaning to do it, but I want to set like, you know, a cron job that will just shut the machines down after like, you know, an hour of inactivity or something like that. So.
What instance sizes are you using?
I started off with like M1 small, and that was a real pain in the ass because it wasn't fast enough. I tried to create a cluster of like 20. It didn't run that much faster, and it took forever to sync stuff down. So I switched to like an M1 medium, and yeah, that's sort of like it's like they have a flavor that's like compute heavy, and I just used that, and it was like way faster. So I didn't really experiment too much, but I'm sure there's a lot of, you know, experimentation.
So does Hydra break it up which tests each one?
Right. Yeah. I didn't really dig into the guts of Hydra, but I think what it does is it, you know, it's basically just instructing each server to run this test, and then your controlling machine is just sort of figuring out what's done and what's left to be done.
Does it use PDSH?
I don't know. I think what it does is just use SSH.
Really?
So it's just it fires up like a process on the running machine, and it's sort of communicating with that, like sending results from it.
Is your team doing like test-driven development, or will a suite that large?
I do test-driven development.
So you run this like every time you change.
What's that?
So this suite runs like every time you change the code.
Well, I gotta come clean with you. We're not actually using this solution. Our sysadmin cobbled together a similar thing just with Bash, and like made me feel bad. So, but we're it's basically the same thing, right? Use the cloud servers to split up the job, and it works pretty well. Like, we got into this mode where we just wouldn't run the whole suite all the time. We would just sort of run a few tests, and maybe at the end of the week run the whole suite, or maybe as we got closer to release. And I think we all just sort of finally decided that was folly, and put some work into.
Pretty easy to push your code up to instances.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. You asked, what do I use to push the code up to the instances? rsync.
Do you have a database instance on each machine?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, they're all just like what
Little
would happen a
dead
lot is like, I found myself having to shell into these little instances to see what went wrong all the time. So it was good to be able to shell into one, and it was just like a little mini environment, great test. You can fire up the debugger, Vim, whatever you needed to do to just sort of figure out what broke.
And all the results come back to where you invoke the rake test.
Hydra manages that. It gives you like this nice little, thing with arrows. Well, actually, it's like. Well, thanks a lot.
Cool, thank you. Last we got Albert, who is our first logic guy to do a presentation. So, represent the home team. Albert, take it away.
Hey guys, so I'm a programmer of logic, and I'm going to present batch processing under Ruby. So, getting back to the the whole scripting part of Ruby, actually getting it to run other things that do useful things. There we go. So background, a little bit about my Ruby environment, I suppose. So some stats about the hardware. Factor is actually a little gem that you can use to get some of your information out from your system. And should warn you that when you call something like processor count, it doesn't actually give you the processor count. Depending on the operating system, it could give you the hyperthread count. So that might be important depending on downstream what you're running in terms of your program, some other program. Windows 764. This is nice because it returns Windows. Some of you may know that when you're running Ruby under Windows, you do some sort of like call to tell you what system you're under. Sometimes it says like M-wing or whatever because it's using something like that. And this is Ruby MRI 32-bit because that's the default that comes with the simple Ruby installer under Windows.
Factor is part of Puppet, right?
Sorry?
Is Factor part of Puppet?
I don't know.
I think it is.
Yeah. I don't know. So you can get the 64-bit version of it, but if you're in Ruby and you're like, I don't know, what version is this? Just run this and it'll tell you how many bytes that takes up. And of course, if you're calling a Java program, you can specifically tell Java to use the 32 or 64-bit version of itself. And that actually might be an issue depending on what libraries you're using. All these other wonderful system things we get to ignore to some degree.
Can you speak louder, please?
Sorry?
Can you speak louder, please?
Oh, yeah, sure. So first thing, it's like, oh, well, how do I run a simple shell command? Go to that website. It tells you 6 ways of doing it. Right. If you're looking for scripting parameter control, look into Thor. I believe someone did something here about Thor. Though I don't know if you can or how easy it is to use Thor. I didn't use it. I computed my own parameters later on because they were quite simple. Output consumption. So you've got two choices, online and offline. Offline being after your batch program runs or whatever is running, you can just sort of ingest the output. Or during its runtime, you can ingest its output. And if you're using something like Open3, you can do this for online and offline. And exception handling and logging, I'll talk about later. So one thing which is sort of annoying is hangs. You call image magic or something and it just crashes. Or something stuck in an infinite loop because that's what it does. So a bunch of simple ways you can do it. Just use timeout and perhaps even configure timeout to timeout longer for a very large input, whatever very large input means to you. It could be how many rows in a CSV file, it could be general size of the file, or whatever. You can get a little fancier and you can write a little process and memory monitor. So if a certain process is taking up no CPU time and has the exact same memory footprint, well maybe it's doing nothing. Of course that's an issue when you run a command and that command runs another command because it won't see that. Keep that in mind. You could get super fancy, over-engineer the hell out of it and do some sort of heartbeat signal fallback, client server thing. And that's like a whole other thing, so let's not get into that. So fine, let's have multiple executions. You've got several cores on your computer. Let's get them to work. First thing you do, you make a lot of workers. However many you want, depending on your cores and your hyperthreads and whatnot. Some processes don't like hyperthreading because it's got some race conditions in there, so sometimes you want to just turn that off, actually. Also for debugging under hyperthreading is very annoying sometimes. Constructing a task list. So let's do something simple. You've got a directory full of programs. Let's get the MD5 hashes of them, or well, that's a disk bottleneck. I don't know. You want to compute something with these. Like they're all image files. Let's turn them into black and white image files. So you make a whole big list of those files. Something I found out the hard way is that using something like dir entries is super slow. Especially if you're trying to recurse into the directories and get every single file out of those that location. You really want to use the system call, whatever that may be. A directory /s or ls/whatever. And then you want to split tasks. You have two choices for splitting up your tasks. You have static and dynamic splitting up. So dynamic is you've got all these workers running and you have a master list of things to do, and you say, okay, give me the next one, give me the next one. Or you can have a static one. So at the beginning, just you got 8 workers or something. Everybody get 1/8 of the list. And that's sort of an issue with sharing a master list, and you got to synchronize everything. So if you have a static list, it's much easier, especially if your files don't take up radically different amounts of time per file. And of course, now you got to execute the task, and you want to keep it simple. If you've got a lot of parameters or it's complicated for whatever reason, you'll run into problems very quickly with analyzing your output. So you want to keep them all sort of generically the same when you're actually executing. Each worker is a new thread, no big deal, because the heavy lifting is done by some other program. So even though Ruby doesn't, have some issues with threads or many processes and syncing up and mutexes and stuff like that, you don't have to worry about that. And of course, signal back to the main thread when you're done. I use something really simple, which is polling and go to sleep and see if everybody's done yet. So output is a bit of an issue because you've got to synchronize this. If you have a simple output, like you just write things to the console puts, you quickly find out that puts is not atomic, meaning if you have a few things, they might end up on the same line, and then you have two new line characters. So easy way around that is you just add a new line character to the end of whatever string you have at the end of puts. What else? Right, so Ruby has no semaphores, or no semaphore support that I can find. So you only have mutexes, and that's limiting, but you can work around that. And of course you can just use log4r, and that's really the nuclear option because that'll solve a lot of your problems. Here's a nice little thing that they put up, and it's a good read just in general if you're interested in logging. So you have all this output, you got to organize it. Simple things to do, you just dump it in CSV, and you got to be careful because, from internationalization, we know that a lot of character support will mess you up sometimes. Or, you can do UTF-8 and XML and all that, but then it's not human readable. You got to get some sort of XML viewer. And I use Internet Explorer, so that's not the best one. It's slow. If someone else has a better one to suggest, go for it. But so if your XML is something like 20 megs or 50 megs, it's going to be very, very slow, very annoying to scroll through. But IE has this wonderful thing where you can collapse. The XML tags or whatnot. Chrome doesn't have that, so if you're using Chrome to look at XML, it doesn't do that, which is sort of annoying. Then be cake, because this is probably going to take a while to do all this. If you want the slides, take a picture of that. I put it up on Dropbox, and that's about it. So this was really just a collection of things you have to think about when you're trying to get a bunch of stuff executed in a massive shell script-like structure with Ruby. Question? Oh, yes.
You go ahead.
No, did you use some of this stuff on a recent project? Is that where it came from?
Yeah, so I'm new to Ruby, and so there's this testing thing, I suppose, and a lot of testing thing was just creating this output data and comparing it to something else, sort of like regression testing, right? So if you're, upgrading to a new version of the library or something, you want to get a bunch of output and then compare it to old output. And sure, I guess, we can do all this other fancy stuff, but I'll just use the basic tool and create the output. And that, that's what I did. And I did it for something that took, I think on single thread, it was something ridiculous, like an hour and a half. Then I dumped it on all my horizontal threads and everything, and it took a lot less. Yes?
If you're using the operating system commands, then you lose that Windows, Linux, or Unix portability though, right?
Yeah.
So you gotta know which one. And also a question about the thread. When you say you start the thread and then you sleep and poll, is that what you're doing?
Yeah, so the main thread just polls all the other worker threads and says, are you done with your task list? Yes. Yet. Yes or no. But if you have a master task list, you just see if it's empty or not. If you have a master task list that all the workers are just grabbing one from and moving it, then you just check the master list and see if it's empty or not.
What if they grab one and then they crash and never finish the job?
Yeah, so that's where the timeout and all that comes into play. Because there's a worker and it's keeping track of that, right? And if it says, okay, you take up too much time, I'm going to kill you. Or if your process and your memory don't change, I'm going to kill you. And you just log it as an error and come back to it later. Yes.
So when you talk about appending a new line to the end of the put string,
yeah,
that'll result in 2 new lines. Could you do just a print, append the new line to the end of the print string? Would that do the same thing without the extra new line?
I'm not sure, because I don't know why puts is not atomic. I don't know at what point it breaks down.
It's probably buffering, and then it flushes its buffer so often. If you have 2 threads competing for that resource, then
yeah. So I'm guessing it's like printing your string, and then it's adding a new line or something. And then
if it's doing 2 separate calls to the operating system,
well, I don't know if it's buffering.
You write a lot of rails on the puts that can do massive outputs, so it'll sort of sit there and wait for the buffer and find out something. I only see it like
Sure, but it's not only that. It's just so if you're trying to do, like put this string and then go to this line, put this string. Yeah, exactly. You gotta have like several things on one line, then a bunch of empty lines, and you're like, we're just. So it's unexpected, right? So that's one of the gotchas you gotta look out for, which you'll see right away.
and you could use a mutex to protect that. So you take out a lock, right, and then release the lock.
Yeah, that's what I did, and it was just complicated for no reason. It's like, oh look, I'll add a new line. Oh, that magically worked. So
it's cool.
It's like one of those hacks you don't really want to acknowledge exists, but you use it anyway. Yes.
I don't know if you mentioned it. If you did, I apologize. But another advantage of calling external commands is that if you have more than one CPU, then those commands can run on multiple CPUs, right? So doesn't Ruby's global interpreter lock mean that only one CPU can be running at any given time for a process?
Right, but when you do a system call, that doesn't go into that. It just creates a new process.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So I'm just talking about like the dir entries versus the. That's another reason why the external thing might be better. Does that make sense?
I suppose. I just figure, Microsoft or whoever, wrote or Apple, whatever operating system, just knows how to use their file system extremely well. Where there's some sort of level of abstraction for Ruby that, uses it less well. But I found out of other system level commands as well. So.
But I will ask for the benefit of the people who didn't make it out tonight, if you and the other speakers could upload your slides. That would be fantastic. Once again, I'd like to thank, obviously I'd like to thank our speakers. I'd like to thank Sean, I'd like to thank Albert, Troy, Dan, what's it called? Oğuz? How do you say your name? Okay, Oğuz. Again, thank you to Logic for hosting us every month. That's huge. How you finding a space in the city, metro accessible, available, free, all these things coinciding is it's a rare bird, and I appreciate them coming through for us once again. And again, thank you to Intridia for sponsoring the event and providing us with nourishment to the extent that Papa John's is nourishing. And that's about it for this month. I want to thank all you guys for coming out. I hope to see you again in 2012. Just again, another reminder, we need speakers every month. I do have folks lined up for January and February, so you have time to think about stuff, bounce some ideas off of me for each other. I'll help you refine it and work it into something that is good for the group. And that's pretty much it. I hope that some of you will be joining us at Rocket Bar around the corner for those who aren't, have a safe trip home, and I'll see you hopefully in January. So thank you everyone for coming.